I know Kentucky basketball has had to fight through some adversity as of late, but all signs point to the Wildcats heading into SEC play on fire.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be breaking down why I believe that Kentucky basketball is going to head into SEC play on fire. We've got 2 more games until then, and I think there's a lot of things to point towards as showing why the Cats will start to build some momentum here, at least in terms of quality of play. I should say at the very least. Also on today's episode, going to ask the question, can the defense hold up? Speaking of some of those issues, that adversity that Kentucky's facing, what's going on with the defense? And is it an actual problem? We'll also dive into that at the end of the show. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. That's right, the College Football Playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff is presented by Allstate, and it begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. Make sure you go and check it out. I know we're college basketball first here, but a lot of college football fans, obviously, watching the show, myself included, doing the show. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball should head into SEC play on fire, and there's a couple of reasons for this. Part of it has to do with the 2 opponents that they're playing to finish out this non-conference slate, and then also I think it has to do with this coaching staff and the way that Mark Pope, I believe, will adjust to some of the problems that Kentucky's been having, which again, we will dive into those later in the show. But first, I want to focus on this schedule. First of all, the Kentucky Wildcats are 10-1. If I had told you that Kentucky would be heading into the Ohio State game 10-1, you would have absolutely taken that in the offseason. In fact, if we go back to the beginning of the season, before the season started, and I gave my win-loss predictions for every single game, I said 3 losses, which was kind of what I was expecting coming out of the non-conference slate. 2 or 3 losses, and that would be good. If you were able to get one of Duke or the Zags, I would be absolutely thrilled with that. Turns out Kentucky beat them both, losing to Clemson on the road, which is a shame, but I think that the problems that Kentucky exhibited in that game against the Tigers, I think those are solvable. And I think that you'll see Kentucky start to work on those in the future, specifically in terms of physicality, getting to the rim, drawing fouls, et cetera, et cetera. But these 2 opponents now that you're 10-1 that Kentucky are going to face, they should beat both of them. And I know that Ohio State, as they currently sit, they are a quadrant 1 win, and they're currently top 40 on KenPom. I don't know if that's going to hold because of how their season may start to play out, because of the fact that they are going to play incredibly shorthanded against Kentucky on Saturday. Ohio State is now down to a 7-man rotation. Aaron Bradshaw, former Kentucky Wildcat, he is currently out with some different issues, none of them health-related. Don't want to get into that today. But Aaron Bradshaw is out, not playing for Ohio State right now. And then lead guard, one of the biggest transfer portal additions for them this offseason, Meechie Johnson, has taken a leave of absence from the Buckeyes. He is going to attend to some quote-unquote personal matters. So right now, Ohio State is down one of their better forwards and one of their best guards. Obviously, Bruce Thornton has been really good for them so far this season, shooting almost 49% from 3 as their lead PG1. Johnson coming off the bench here, rotating into, or excuse me, not coming off the bench, but starting at shooting guard and then rotating in with Thornton and John Mobley, who's a 6'1", 175 freshman, who's also been playing pretty decent as well, if you'd like to say, shooting 53.6% from beyond the arc. So they've got 2 flamethrowers in that backfield still, but they are backcourt, but they're going to be asked to do a lot more now that Johnson has decided to step away from the program, and you're going to have less depth in that front court. And if you want to go and look, and if you don't believe me about them playing a 7-man rotation, they got absolutely crushed by Auburn, 91-53, and then in the next game, Meechie Johnson did not play, and they played one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 different guys, 14 minutes or more. They got 4 different guys in at the very end of the game, but they all played 3 or 2 minutes because it was a blowout. So this is a true 7-man rotation that has its analytical deficiencies. If you want to go look at KenPom, if you want to look at Evan Mia, which we'll talk at length about what Evan Mia thinks about this Kentucky team later on in the show, because there are some positive things we need to take away here. If you want to go look at their analytics, yes, they shoot very well from 3. Their 40.6% is 10th nationally, and they play really good 3-point defense, and they play decently at the rim as well. But outside of that, they don't grab rebounds consistently. They don't create a ton of turnovers. They struggle to keep teams off the foul line. They themselves do not finish particularly well at the rim, at least relative to Kentucky. They do have some struggles at the charity stripe as well. Opponents are shooting very well from the free throw line. They themselves are only shooting 68%, which is just straight up not good. They're average distributing the ball, and they just overall tempo-wise are pretty mediocre in that spot as well. So, and there's nothing wrong with being an average pace team, and UConn has won back-to-back national championships being slow. It's just my point is here, Ohio State, they're not phenomenal to begin with. They've gotten blown out by SEC competition. They actually lost earlier in the season 78-64 against Texas A&M, so they've lost to 2 SEC teams, and they're going to be at a neutral site here in Madison Square Garden against a Kentucky team that is going to put a lot of pressure on them. And they're going to not just shoot threes, but they're also going to try and draw a lot of contact at the rim. And if Andrew Carr and Amari Williams are able to do that against some of Ohio State's forwards, they're going to have a massive problem. I don't think Kentucky's going to put a number on Ohio State like Auburn did, 91-53, but I think Kentucky is going to win that game. And if I had to pick right now, I'd say they win the game comfortably. Watch them lose this weekend, and it'd be very sad. You've also got Brown following that game for Kentucky. Brown is actually not a horrible team. They're actually pretty decent in terms of KenPom rating. They're playing pretty solid offense and defense right now, despite having an insanely weak strength of schedule. So they've not really played anybody, but at least they've handled business to an extent. They're 7-3 right now underneath head coach Mike Martin. The funny thing about Brown that I want to point out here real quick is they played Rhode Island at home. They won in overtime. Big win for them. Best win of the season so far. They will play December 22nd. They will play at Kansas. And then following that on the 31st, they will play Kentucky. And then they play Johnson and Wales, Rhode Island, which, okay, you play 2 of the greatest college basketball programs of all time. Then you turn right back around and play a law firm before opening up Ivy League play. Sure thing, Brown. But they shoot well. You know, they play hard defense. They do a decent job on the boards despite being incredibly small. And they could give Kentucky some problems, especially considering what Colgate and Georgia State were able to do, Western Kentucky as well. I'm not banking on it, but we'll have to see. But still, that's another game that Kentucky, according to KenPom, is projected to win by 20. So I think you beat Ohio State. I think you probably beat them by double digits. I would hope you beat them by at least 6, 7 plus, especially considering where their roster is at currently. And then also, I would expect you to go and manhandle Brown, which leads into that Florida game. And that Florida team, man, very good. Could very well win the SEC this season. Have not lost yet, heading into Rupp Arena in a very hostile environment. Kentucky, they've been underperforming relative to the start of the season. But with these 2 games coming up against Ohio State and Brown, I think it should not only be a confidence booster, but I also think that you should be able to start to work on some things that maybe you've struggled with, specifically on defense. I want to ask the question here, can Kentucky's defense hold up, not just against the Buckeyes and Brown, but also against this SEC slate? We'll dive into that in just a second. Before I do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if they win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app has everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on this same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football and basketball season as well. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is very, very simple. It's the best place with real money sports action. They've got over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. All you have to do, very simple, is pick more or less than on at least 2 players for a shot up to win 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's daily fantasy sports app. I have loved using Prize Picks throughout the NFL season. I actually did a pretty decent job on Thanksgiving as well, getting to watch those games with the family. It was really fun to be able to interact with everybody, go more or less on a bunch of different players that were playing across the day, and I would strongly encourage you guys to go check out Prize Picks. You can download the app today. You can use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. So you can go into the app if you use code LOCKEDONCollege. Place the lineup, $5 more or less on a player, and you will get $50 instantly whenever you play that lineup. Again, download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. And so we've talked about why I believe Kentucky basketball is going to head into SEC play on fire. The 2 opponents that they're playing, for better or for worse, are not as good as Kentucky on paper. And so because of Ohio State's shortcomings in terms of rotation, because of Brown's shortcomings, because of just who they are, it's an Ivy League school, I expect Kentucky to win both those games, both of them comfortably to some extent, heading into SEC play. This is where things get interesting for me. Kentucky's defense, as good as it has been relative to last year's team, which it's been pretty dang good in comparison, is still lacking in just a couple of different areas. And if they were able to specifically fix one area of this team, I think Kentucky would be almost unstoppable. We'll get to that later in the show. For now, I want to focus on what the numbers say. According to KenPom, and we will discuss at length what Evan Mia says, and I'll explain my thought process on why I think it's a very positive thing where Kentucky's at defensively later. There are still concerns. But according to KenPom, Kentucky is now 50th nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency. Last year, they were 109th. So it's a massive step up for Kentucky. But 50th nationally. They were 44th whenever we last talked after they played Louisville. They dropped from 29th to 44th, and because of games that have happened around them, they've dropped to 50th. They're still number 12 in the country according to KP, which is great. They were, I don't even know if they were in the top 40 to begin the season. It's awesome. And if you go and look at some of the numbers, like they're very good. Kentucky effective field goal percentage is 27th nationally, which is excellent. That's enough to win you a national title. You are 30th nationally in offensive rebound percentage. That's great. You don't allow second chance opportunities. You are 16th nationally in free throw attempts over field goal attempts. That is wonderful. You prevent efficient shot making. You prevent second chance opportunities, and you prevent teams from getting to the foul line. That is the hallmark of a very well-coached defense. We'll get to the one problem later in the show, but we continue down here. Kentucky, 13th nationally in three-point defense. Awesome. Kentucky, 47.6%. That's what they're allowing opponents to shoot inside the arc. There are multiple national champions over the past decade that have won with worse interior defense. We'll absolutely take that. Top 45 in block percentage. Awesome. Kentucky's doing so much on the defensive side of the ball that is so, so good. But they're still giving up points. Interesting. And on top of all of this, Kentucky has already played essentially the worst that their schedule has to offer. I'll pull this up on KenPom. I've got it written down in my notes, but I really want to pull this up on KenPom just to be able to explain this to you guys. So this analytics website has the opportunity for you to look at what's called the opponent tracker, which if you click on it, you can see what your average opponent has been doing, or excuse me, what your opponents have been doing nationally ranked in terms of offensive and defensive efficiencies, their effective field goal percentage, blah, 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 just like what they're doing analytically. If you go and look at offense and you see what Kentucky's opponents have been doing on offense, it's Kentucky has already played the worst that their schedule has to offer. They've already played 8 of the 11 worst offenses they will face this year. 8 of the 11. And that is Louisville, Wright State, Lipscomb, Western Kentucky, Colgate, Georgia State, Bucknell, and Jackson State. Louisville all the way down to Jackson State. I will say, though, it's a pretty wide net that's being spread there in the bottom teams because Louisville's ranked 60th nationally in offensive efficiency, which is good. It's not bad. And then Jackson State's ranked 337th. Yikes. But they're giving up an average 69.6 points per game, almost 70 a game. That's a lot. It's simply a lot for what Kentucky is doing numbers-wise. It's kind of, the numbers almost clash if you don't watch the team, which we will explain in a minute. What's the problem? Here's the other interesting side of this. You may say, well, Kentucky's faced Duke. They've faced Gonzaga. You know, they've faced some pretty good offenses. And you're right. They have faced 3 of the top 13 offenses they will see this year. And I say 3 of the top 13 because there's Gonzaga, there's Duke, who are both in the top, I believe, 7, and then there's a wide gap, and then Clemson's number 13. Although I will say, all top of Kentucky's 13 offenses that they'll face this year are also in the top 35 nationally, which just goes to show you how good the SEC is this year, specifically on offense. But against these 3 opponents, Gonzaga, Duke, and Clemson, they're giving up an average of 77 points per game. I will note that the Zags scoring 89 does dramatically change this points per game total here. Otherwise, it would be 71, which is literally like a point and a half above what Kentucky's been giving up so far against some of the worst of their competition. But still, they had some issues against the Zags, and it's not like they're going to face a bunch of offenses that are much different in terms of ability to dominate at the rim, and then also tempo, and then really solid guard play. Kentucky has their work cut out for them. If you go and look inside that top 30, you are going to play, or 35, including Clemson. You're going to play Ohio State this weekend. You're going to play Vanderbilt twice, which is crazy that Vanderbilt's that good on offense. You are going to play Alabama twice. You're going to play Tennessee twice. You're going to play Mississippi State early in the SEC schedule. You're going to play Auburn, who is the number 1 team in the nation offensively at the end of the year. You've got so many different teams on this schedule here that can give you fits. And by the way, Oklahoma, A&M, Texas, Georgia, and Arkansas, the teams between Clemson and Louisville, the 2 teams we just discussed, they're still ranked 40th to 59th. So it's not like their offenses are bad either. Like you have your work cut out for you defensively. And you've already shown some issues, and yet the numbers still say that Kentucky's fine. Why are they fine? What's the problem? And is the problem actually something we need to be concerned with? We'll dive into that here in just a second. Before I do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about the college football playoff. Because it is, ladies and gentlemen, that time of the year. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. You don't want to miss a moment of the action. You can watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, wrapping up the show today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. So we've talked about, can the defense hold up? Because they've already played the worst that their schedule has to offer, and they've got a ton of challenges ahead of them in terms of game by game by game, having to face good offense after good offense after good offense. So I'm asking, can the defense hold up? But what's the actual problem? Because all the numbers I read to you indicate that Kentucky is fine. They're pretty good. Well, it has to do with lack of chaos on the defensive end of the floor. Kentucky, despite playing very well, not allowing their opponents to shoot high percentages, they do not cause chaos, and they therefore give up a lot more possessions than they normally would. This is compounded, I believe that's the right word to say, by the fact that Kentucky plays with a high tempo. You want to go look at adjusted tempo, Kentucky, 22nd nationally. Their average possession length is 16th nationally. That's going to give you problems. We talked about this so much last year. I talked about it on yesterday's episode, but we're bringing it up again. What's the problem? Well, Kentucky doesn't create a ton of turnovers, right? Starting with, let's go back to that. 338th nationally in that category. You're not seeing Kentucky do enough in terms of steals, in terms of forcing the ball out of bounds, creating charges, creating offensive fouls. You're not seeing Kentucky take the ball away enough. If you're going to play with this high of a pace, this high of a tempo, and you're going to give your opponents more opportunities to score because of that, because the less time you have the ball, the more time your opponent does. If you're not going to try and take some of those seconds back, even if your opponent's not the best at shooting, they're going to have the opportunity to score more. Let's say, hypothetically, you and I wanted to play a game of horse, right? But the way that it worked is we both had maybe, well, let me say this. Let's say that you and I both wanted to play first to 10, right? Let's just we'll take threes, right? And it'll be the first person to make 10 3-pointers. And we go back and forth. We go back and forth. We go back and forth. We both get a turn each. And I'm a better shooter, which is just naturally the assumption. I'm a better shooter, so therefore I am more likely to get to 10 before you if we're just going back and forth. But let's say instead of I take a shot, you take a shot, I take a shot, and you get 2 shots, right? The average, the chance of you scoring more is obviously high, and the chance of you making it more competitive is even higher. Let's translate that over to time. Let's just say let's just say I was going to take as many shots as I could in 30 seconds, right? And you were going to do the same after me. See how many shots we could make. Again, I'm the better shooter, of course. Of course I am. And so therefore, I'm going to more than likely make more shots than you. Let's say, then, let's try and even it up. I'm going to give you a minute. I'm still going to have 30 seconds. You're going to get to put up shots. We'll give you a rebounder. We'll just let you catch and shoot as much as you want. You are going to either close the gap or win that contest, right? Because you have more time. You have more time to take shots. And even if you're not as good of a shooter as I am, you're still going to make it competitive. Kentucky is not taking the ball away enough from their opponents. They're giving their opponent too much time. They're giving them those extra seconds. I hope I explained that well. I had it written down and I explained it very poorly, I believe. They're not taking the ball away. And because Kentucky is actively telling everybody, hey, we're going to take those 30 seconds instead of the minute. We're going to take, specifically actually, we're going to take 15.4 seconds per trip down the floor to take our shot attempt, which is insanely fast. You are asking for trouble on the defensive end of the floor if you're not saying there, we're going to try and create some steals. We're going to give you that time. Because yes, you may not make the first shot that you take. You may not make the second or the third, but because you have the extra time to take the fourth and fifth shot, oh, look, you hit those two, and you're scoring more points than a normal team would with normal tempo. This is the trade-off for Kentucky basketball. This is what the trade-off was last year. This is what the trade-off is this year. You cannot, if you are Kentucky, continue to live like this. You have to do one of two things. One of three things, actually. Which is kind of what blends into the question here. Well, what's the actual problem? Is it real? You have to do one of two things. You have to, one, create more turnovers. Take away those seconds from your opponent that way. Or you have to slow down the game. Take away the seconds from your opponent that way. Or the third option, you just simply have to make more shots. You yourself have to score more. Kentucky is only shooting 36.7% from three. I say only. That's very good. They're top 25 in two-point field goal percentage as well. If they shot better from three, almost all the games that Kentucky's played this year would have been no contest. It wouldn't have mattered. You're getting all these possessions, you're playing with all this high tempo, and you're hitting a shot nearly every time down the floor. You're giving yourself more chances to score. You have to do one of those three things. Outscore your opponent by a higher volume to not have to play as aggressive defense, play more aggressive defense, or slow the game down. That problem, I believe, is real for Kentucky in SEC play. This is a real concern that we need to be addressing right now. There are very much so actual problems with Kentucky's defense. And you may say, but all the numbers you listed earlier, like they don't allow opponents to shoot a high percentage from three. They don't allow them to shoot very well. Yes, but again, if you give the opponent more seconds, if you give them the ball more, it's going to average out. It's going to average out. And teams in the SEC, they're going to start to break some of those numbers that you've built up. They're going to have games where they shoot 38 to 40% from three. They're going to have games where the ball just clanks off the rim in a specific way where you're able to grab more offensive rebounds than you normally would. You're going to have games where the officiating crew decides, you know what, let's make it a free throw shooting contest tonight, and they're going to put the opponent on the charity stripe, and goodness knows that team can shoot. You're going to have teams that challenge you in different ways that your non-conference schedule has not so far this year. Florida is going to be one of those teams that does that. Georgia is going to be one of those teams that does that. Mississippi State absolutely is going to be one of those teams that does that. Those are your first three SEC games. 2 of them on the road. It's a wake-up call for this Kentucky team. You have to figure something out. Because as good as you are in certain areas, these other areas, they're going to drag you down if you don't adjust. Again, one of the three ways, you have to adjust one of the thrry ways. You either shoot out of it, and it doesn't matter. You create more turnovers, or you slow down. Those are the only 3 options. You do not have another answer. You cannot, statistically, I believe, play better than you are currently on defense in terms of allowing the efficiency that you are. I think this is the best it's going to get. The positive here that I want to conclude the episode with today is that Evan Mia takes out, I believe, the tempo when looking at Kentucky's defense. Kentucky's defense is 50th on KenPom. It's 28th on Evan Mia. I think because of what we're seeing on Evan Mia and what we're looking at on KenPom, obviously there's a discrepancy here. I think there is room for hope. I think there's room for optimism. And by the way, this is coming from a 10-1 team, right? I mean, they're cooking. I'm talking about this. I'm talking about this like they've lost half their games, or they're going to lose half their games. There's hope that Kentucky doesn't end up a 21 or 22 win team. There's hope that they clinch that 1 seed and they play very well in the regular season, because of the fact that the problem is solvable. Last year, it felt like the problem wasn't solvable. You had guys down low that wouldn't play defense. You had guards that would jump at every single shot fake on the planet, and it was so annoying. We're not going to get into those players. We're not going to talk about those players today. This is you can fix this, right? You have the ability to fix this, which is, I think, what Evan Mia is seeing and what they've seen so far. And I think that's where we're going to have to end the show today. The question: can the defense hold up? Or is it actually a problem? Yes, I believe it's actually a problem. And yes, I also think that you can very much so fix this, which goes all the way back to what I said at the beginning of the show. Kentucky could easily catch fire here at the end of this non-conference slate. They could do it. And then that could be the momentum that drives them into Florida. Florida scores 65 in a low shooting performance where they create some turnovers. You know, you could find ways to start to build some momentum here. Just see if Kentucky does it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Will Kentucky do it? Are there actually problems on the defense? That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at Lance_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.